Hey y'all, it's your captain for all things creative coming at you with a whole bunch of drama from the Love Island universe. Starting with the Ace interview, which just dropped today and kind of moved me to chorus, and also a Love Island reunion Rumble recap. If you're new to this channel, welcome. Please like, share, and subscribe. And if you're returning, thank you so much for rocking with us. If you want a longer review of just the reunion, I went live yesterday with No Chaser TV. The link is in my community post, and I'll also put it in this description box. But for today, what we're here to talk about is this Ace interview with Speedy that really made me come out of my black hole of work that I was doing and moved me to just think about the lessons we learned from these people on Love Island. And then I'll also go through some of what I think were the most important moments of the reunion that also, give some lessons. So let's start off with this Ace interview. Now, Ace was my best dressed guy at the reunion. And again, if you were tuned in to the recap that I did yesterday on No Chaser TV, and if you've watched any of my other Love Island videos, you would know that I have always loved Ace. No one can make me hate Ace. But this Speedy interview really reminded me of all the reasons why I have always said that even though I love Ace and nobody can make me hate Ace, there are a lot of valid reasons why he did not win Love Island. Because I think it's partly because of his immaturity, but Ace does have a problem with balancing his desire, to stand on business and speak the truth versus being wise and knowing how to tell the truth without being very brutal about it, right? So when Ace talks about how, he and Chelly should have won and all those kinds of things. And Chelly was talking about how, people forgot the message of Love Island. I was thinking, you see, but y'all were the first ones that started that whole wave of disrespecting connections and love. And Austin said it best. It's like, yeah, that's the tone you set. So the trap that they used to kick a lot of couples out of the island, like, Hannah and Charlie, they ended up falling in themselves. And for Ace, also, him not minding his business, If, again, you watched the No Chasing TV interview, we talked about, well, what's the best way to go about Love Island? And I said, minding your business and following your heart. And if Ace had done a little more minding his business in the villa, him and Chelly would have had a better chance of winning. But it seems like he's not learning his lesson, because from this Speedy interview, he's not minding his business again now. I know, again, Ace wants to stand on business all the time, but I've learned the hard way, right, that even if people say they want the truth, a lot of the times what people really want, because, we're, as humans, kind of self-centered kind of creatures, a lot of people want others to kind of confirm the decisions that they want to make or validate, how they see themselves and how they see situations. So if you're not careful with how you talk to people, you can alienate them by telling the truth in a harsh and brutal way. For example, I've told friends that, their boyfriend or whatever was cheating on them, and them same people turned around and were mad at me. And, them two got back together and I was the one on the outs. Again, because if people are not ready to receive the truth, they won't be able to receive it. And also, you have to be wise about it. You have to be able to read rooms and read the situation. If someone, again, in that situation is not ready to hear about that person being bad for them, or they know that the person is bad for them deep in their heart, and you tell them that, they are not going to want to hear from you. And same thing with the Speedy interview. Him talking on NicOlandria, that was the worst part for me, because if he knows that Olandria has been through so much, why pile on to the negative narratives about her and Nick? And he knows firsthand how he felt when people, were talking about him and Chelly scamming when they indeed knew each other beforehand, right? So why is he putting that same, insinuation that Nick is scamming Olandria out there when Olandria is the one who's going to get hurt? So at the end of the day, even though he wants to seem like he's standing on business and whatnot, he's not leading fully with love. And again, love is something that he shows a lot in his life in terms of him with his dance lives, and he was just giving back to the community, giving school supplies to kids. Ace is a sweet person on the inside, but he's immature. So at the end of the day, the way that he is not wise about how he tells the truth, or even not wise about times when he's, doing strategy and things like that, like with the Jeremiah situation, it comes out. He needs to mature. Like Jesus said, you got to be peaceful as a dove, but wise as a serpent. Ace does not have wisdom yet. This is the reason why, in spite of him and Chelly having real love, in spite of him being a great person, he rubs a lot of people the wrong way. And I hope for his sake that he matures, he learns to read rooms better, because what is given at the end of the day, if that Speedy interviews that he's jealous of NicOlandria in some way, I think the brand deals that they're getting, the attention that Nick is getting, and also he said specifically that when Nick said that the Final Four deserved to be there, I guess at some point in the reading he was not messing with that. But I called it before, if you go back to my other videos, when Ace and Chelly were on, what was it, After Sun? And he was saying, he wants Amaya and Brian to win. And he even said it the night of his dumping to Amaya and Brian, go for the win. I could tell that he was not, really that good of friends with Nick. And Nick also was trying to distance himself from Ace with the whole, saying that he was going to crash out if a certain clip wasn't played during the reunion. And the clip that he wanted to play and actually did get played was of him standing up for Jeremiah and Taylor and Ace being shown to be the vote that got Jeremiah sent home. So it was 2 versus 1 and not Nick being part of the 3 Musketeers. And I think Nick, he even made a joke about it at the reunion that, I do whatever Ace says, right? He wanted to fight that narrative that he was just a lackey of Ace. And I think he showed that throughout the season, that he has a mind of his own and character of his own, about how he wouldn't pile up on Huda when everybody was piling up on Huda, and how he even voted to send Huda home twice when everybody else fumbled that opportunity to, get a little more positivity in the villa by stopping all the negative drama, by getting rid of the person who was at the center of the drama. And at the end of the day, Ace, I love him down, but this interview was not a good look. And even Olandria responded. She posted something right after the interview came out that basically said, "Child, anyways, this Tuskegee event went well." So it does seem like Olandria saw the interview and she's not, being bothered by it. I think Ace also unfollowed Love Island. And I think from what he said in the Speedy interview, he's upset about the villain edit that he got. I do think that Ace did get a villain edit. But at the end of the day, they can only edit so much. What he did to Jeremiah and how he was minding other people's business a little too much caught up with him in the villa. And even in the reunion, he apologized to Jeremiah about, voting him out and saying, yeah, probably Austin should have went home. And again, this interview, he's not doing right by Olandria, who he claims is his girl. He needs to, again, learn how to be a little wiser and learn how to speak the truth without brutality, in my humble opinion. Okay, so let's get into the reunion, since I've kind of touched on it a little bit when talking about Ace. So what I want to do is go through the top 10 clashes at the reunion and say what lessons they show about the show and the people. Right. So, in terms of the reunion rumbles for Love Island season 7, number 10 has to be Chris versus Huda. Chris was also my worst dress, by the way. And Huda did not make the best dress list because of her hair. I think the updo did not do her justice. She has styled her own hair way better during the season, and the dress was boring. So, if you want my fashion review, I did a short about who are my favorite looks, so check that out. But at the end of the day, besides the fashions, I think Chris was not giving Huda any grace for once, but when it comes to him finally saying how he really felt about Huda, it just made it clear how they were using each other all along. And Huda, she seemed actually more honest than Chris throughout the whole, time that they got together, and how, he kind of led her to do the breakup when he was clearly fed up with her. And then he was basically acting like everything was all good until Huda made the comment about, his body parts not reaching where they were supposed to in her Call Her Daddy interview. So Chris finally started showing how he really feels about Huda, but it's a little too late. But I'm glad he stood up for himself, but it just shows that they were both using each other. And at the end of the day, you don't want to be someone's second option. I think Huda did have genuine feelings for Jeremiah. She was looking for a second chance at love with somebody. Why she chose Chelly's person, or the person she knew was into Chelly, was a choice that I think was rooted in kind of like the envious side of Huda, but we'll talk about that another time. And I talked about it again on No Chaser TV. But at the end of the day, Chris was playing games too. So if you play silly games, you get silly prizes. And them two ended up with each other and looking a little foolish at the finale when they broke up. It's like the first couple in history that broke up on Love Island. So at the end of the day, this was a draw. If not, maybe Chris finally showed his true feelings, which made, I guess, him get something off of his chest a little bit and move the needle forward in terms of, him not having to fake it on podcasts. But at the end of the day, they both were using each other. So it's a draw. I don't really care about their relationship. Nah. The number 9 rumble at the reunion was between Coco and Olandria. And in this case, I do feel like Olandria won because, like Olandria said, Coco, I guess, tried to message her in private, but Olandria said public disrespect warrants a public apology. So she's like, don't, try to get out of all the stuff you're saying behind closed doors when you have to give me the chance to tell you how I feel face to face in public. And this is, that at the reunion. So what Coco teaches us is to really don't fall for the peer pressure. And if you don't have nothing nice to say, try not to say it, because being kind would have costed her nothing, but her being shady and nasty to Olandria cost her all the positive public opinion she had during Casa, because everyone was talking about how her face card was not declining, and everybody, including me, was going up for Coco. But when she did that interview with Winter from the Bad Girl Club, now all everybody's talking about is how she basically has egg on her face now because she was trying to backpedal and make excuses for being shady to Olandria, and she ended up looking a fool. So Olandria won that. And again, if you don't have nothing nice to say, don't say nothing at all. She barely, interacted with Olandria during Casa, so she had no business talking about Olandria, talking about my man, my man, my man. Olandria did not talk to her that much for all that to be coming out of Coco during those interviews. All right, the number 8 rumble that had a little significance was, on the surface level, Gracyn versus Pepe. But what this beef or this segment of the reunion showed me is just how much people are scared of Huda, because at the end of the day, this whole fiasco with, the stand on business challenge and Huda, outing Pepe for not liking Gracyn as much and embarrassing Gracyn. That was Huda being a menace. And she literally threw rocks and hit her hands because when people were asking who said this quote, about Pepe not liking Gracyn as much as Hannah, she was on mute. She told Chris on the low. And this is why, when Ace showed up to the reunion, he was like, yo, a lot of people are not standing on business. And Huda tried to act like, what? I backed up everything I said, which was a lie. The lie detector determined that this was a lie because, again, we have evidence in the villa that even on the stand on business challenge, Huda would not put a name on the card that she wrote about Pepe and Gracyn that caused Gracyn all this pain, and Gracyn was still crying. And I think because she's scared of Huda and Huda's fan base, she ended up just taking it all on Pepe. When Pepe told her to her face, like, hey, I'm kind of not feeling you. And Pepe even said again at the reunion, like, I tried to tell you that I wasn't feeling you as much. But Gracyn has every right to feel a little embarrassed and targeted because what Huda wrote on that card was embarrassing. Huda should have pulled her to the side and told her, hey, girl, explore more. But instead, she decided to put on a card that, Pepe ain't feeling Gracyn as much as she's feeling Hannah. Very mean girl, which what people were accusing other people of. But at the end of the day, Huda was doing her same tactics of trying to smooth over everything with everybody at the reunion. And Gracyn forgave her immediately and instead just had all the smoke for Pepe, which again makes me think she either fears Huda and the fans for not saying, yo, that was me, why don't you talk to me? And instead basically calling Pepe out for not talking to her sooner when Pepe did talk to her. So I think, again, all that was misdirected anger that Gracyn should have had for Huda. But because of fear, she's still mad at Pepe for some reason. Pepe handled it like a champ. He's like, I'm sorry, but I definitely told you that I wasn't feeling you. So, again, a lot of people are scared of Huda and her fans, but we shall see what else came up at the reunion with the number 7 Rumble. And the number 7 spot is Hannah versus everybody. But at the end of the day, that segment where they played, the deliberation about how Hannah went home and who voted for her was really revealing because it turns out that Chelly was the one that flipped that vote towards Hannah going home, because at first everyone was talking about strong connections, and I believe it was Olandria that was saying that, yeah, Pepe and Hannah have the strongest connection. And I really like the friendship that Pepe and Olandria had. And everybody's like, oh, yeah, no, they're safe. But then Chelly kind of sounded like Ace, because them two, I do believe, had that same explore strategy and rhetoric for everybody in the villa. Chelly said, well, I don't know if we should go off of strong connections because, who's to say that Huda's, love at first sight with Jeremiah wasn't real? We need to give people a chance to explore. And then that's how Hannah went from being safe to going home. It was Chelly that totally turned that conversation around. And I love Chelly down, but she sounded a lot like Ace. And even, during the show, you saw Chelly was doing Ace dances sometimes. Them two were a very, very in sync duo. And even when, they're a little bit on the outs, when the whole Chris situation happened, we always knew they'd find their way back together. And I think their relationship is very cute. But again, like Nene Leakes say, you don't win when you play dirty. Them two have sowed that seed of everybody need to explore. And they were kicking out all the strong connections. So when they got kicked out, it's very funny that Chelly was like, oh, I feel like people forgot the premise of Love Island. It's about love. But she forgot that she and Ace consistently turned it into Explore Island and kick off Strong Connection Island with their own 2 hands, and they fell in their own trap, which makes me sad for them. But they still won by finding each other. But yes, they only kind of had themselves to blame, right? Number 6 was Charlie versus everybody. And honestly, I don't know why they spent so long on Charlie. We don't really feature him that much, but the main thing he said was that Austin should have went home, which is what I agree with wholeheartedly. But yeah, the fact that he was so angry and a lot of time was spent on him was a waste, because there were much pressing issues at the reunion that they didn't get to because they wasted that time. All right, this brings us to the halfway point. Top five. Number five, Jayden versus Austin versus Andreina, weirdly. This is what has been happening a lot when it comes to reunions. It's kind of like the people that aren't really, the main players. Andreina kind of jumped in to that segment, and I didn't quite like it. I mean, I understood when she was, going toe to toe with Brian about not telling her about Jayden, but the stuff between Jayden and Austin, I think Andreina should have stood out of it. And I do feel like some of the bombshells and the Casa people are trying a little too hard to hold on to the 15 minutes. And like this felt a little try hard for me of Andreina, because basically the situation was that Austin has always been very problematic in a lot of ways, especially, with how he handled the Amaya situation, and how even though he dated Amaya and Chelly in the island, when Jayden showed up, he was like, oh, you're the first and only person I've been interested in. So he was faking it with them other girls, basically. I think the only person he did it right by was Olandria, because according to Jayden, all she asked from Austin was the bare minimum. You don't even have to be faithful. Just tell me if you're going to be unfaithful. And he still played in her face, lied about dating other people, had her going to parties or events, I guess, where he had just come back from a date with other people. And then the people at the party knew that he had just come back from a date, and he lied to her anyway. And then Andreina says she also saw the text too. Again, I don't think Andreina should have jumped in, because Jayden, this was her chance to get Austin together. Because for him to do her that dirty when the bar was so low, Jayden needed time to clear him. She still cleared Austin, but Andreina needs to stay out of it. And again, some of these Casa people and bombshells in general, I think, are really trying to get themselves out there off of the Love Island stuff. But nobody's doing this harder than Sierra. So Andreina is my avatar again for Sierra and the other bombshells and Casa people who I think are holding on to the Love Island thing a little too hard. You see, Jayden got his brand deals and all that. He didn't even come to the reunion because he's good. But Sierra especially, she's the number one offender of the bombshells, who is starting to look a little like she might need help to let go of the Love Island thing, because when NicOlandria got the Nick's brand deal, all of a sudden she was like posting more about Nick's, or I don't know if it resurfaced, but then when all the Bama Barbie posts about Olandria started coming, she decided to do an event where she's talking about she's side Barbie. Like, it's starting to give that some people cannot let go of Love Island. And if anybody needs to let go of Love Island, it's Sierra, because she got kicked off unceremoniously. I do think she should have been at the reunion, but at the end of the day, there was too many people at the reunion. Like, half them cast of people, like, had nothing to add. Like, what was Zach with a C gonna say? What was, Vanna gonna say? They talked to her a little bit, so she had maybe like 1 minute. But again, Andre, a lot of the bombshells, all the Casa people, and especially Sierra, they gotta let go. Especially now that the reunion is over. Please, I don't really want to see them piping up that much. We enjoyed you for your time, but you don't want to, again, let this great opportunity flip on you and make you seem desperate or like you're thirsty, And I will admit that Andre was looking a little parched there. You should have let Jayden roast Austin, as she should have, and stayed out of it. So number 4, Amaya versus everybody. I'm lumping them together because Amaya and Brian have clicked down so hard. It's so sad to see, because they were the supposed winners of Love Island. I think if anything, Amaya was, the one that people were rooting for after everybody saw everybody else's shenanigans. They're like, all right, Amaya, her self-talk and those songs she sung to herself, she's a great role model, again, for being able to encourage yourself. I'll give her that. And that's why I voted for her every time when it was like, which one's your favorite female Love Islander? But that being said, every time Amaya and Brian spoke, they looked worse and worse and worse. And come today, they unfollowed each other. They're not even together. So they really clicked down this reunion. First, Andy talked to Amaya and Brian about the cheating situation, and Amaya was sitting there laughing, acting like there was nothing that was hard about that. But even Brian was like, no, we talked about it, and I had a lapse of judgment. And then Chris talking about, I ain't see anything. It made it look really bad. So the way that Amaya tried to play it down and lie, and then the way that Brian half admitted what he did, and then Chris said actually nothing happened, it made it look horrible. And then when they tried to call Zach out, I guess, about only, giving Amaya attention after he found out she was popular, I side-eyed them because Brian did the same thing. Brian was after Andreina, then after Andreina, he wanted Jayden. He even stood behind Jayden when it was about time for her to be sent home. He wasn't checking for Amaya like that. And now that they have unfollowed each other, all of what they were doing at the reunion looked extra bad. And what really was a nail in the coffin for Amaya was when Ace called her out for bullying him about his height with the call her daddy lady. And again, Amaya, she was painted as a victim, but people forget that she definitely was being very aggressive with Chelly. Like when she figured out that Ace kind of liked her, instead of, talking to Ace or, backing off, she went and got mad at Chelly. Like Chelly can control Ace's heart and cussed Chelly clean out. And you saw, she had these moments, where she wasn't controlling herself. But at the end of the day, it was a tough situation. So I was rooting for her the time she popped off at people, like when she popped off at Austin during the Stand Up Business Challenge, and when she popped off on Zach K2. I didn't mind it, but I did mind when she popped off on Chelly. And Ace did clock her for, being a bully herself. And now that she's aligning herself with Hoodlamore, who shall not be named anymore, because it's very telling, who's clicking up even after all these things are coming out. I think Ace definitely started to expose Amaya for her hypocrisy, especially about bullying, very well at the reunion when he called her out for, doing the short jokes or whatever. And Amaya claims that she tried to get her people to take it down. But then when at the reunion they showed the clip of what Hoodlamore claimed was bullying, when literally like Chelly and Nick and Sierra was talking about how they were all afraid for Iris, and then Huda was posing and Chelly was like, we're not really talking about her. That was when I guess Huda claims that she felt she was bullied. That's the clip that convinced her that she had been bullied. And then Amaya sat next to her talking about, oh yeah, that was mean. And that really, again, made Amaya click down, because that's not mean. Like calling out people's behavior and saying, hey, we had to protect this new bombshell Iris from Huda when she was crashing out, when literally she had 2 or 3 episodes where she was crashing out. And there's pictures of her with bloody knuckles and stuff, and she was calling Jeremiah all kinds of names. She even called Amaya the B word and had her middle finger up at her. So Amaya riding with the narrative that Chelly was being mean also made her click down. So again, Ace exposed her, I guess, the most directly for her hypocrisy. But I think Amaya herself is clicking down by her behavior and the choices she's making, and how her and Brian seem to have been faking it. And now that they've broken up, I think her 15 minutes are about to be up. All right, let's get into the top 3 reunion beef, starting with Jeremiah versus everybody. Now, Jeremiah had a chip on his shoulder. His main point at first was just to try to prove that he wasn't love bombing. I don't know how successful that was, but where he got success was 2 ways. One, he got Ace to back down and admit that maybe that vote where Ace and Taylor clearly were the ones hating and targeting Jeremiah. Ace admitted that maybe he should have sent Austin home. And the fact that Ace's voice was so trembly when he was talking to Jeremiah, he was like, I was shocked, because usually Ace is very strong when he's talking to I guess, not as strong opponents like Austin. But this time, I think the aura that Jeremiah had caught him off guard because he got to, you know, like voice shaking and half like he was finna cry the whole time. I think he knew that he was wrong. His conscience was pricking him. And Ace even said in his Speedy interview that him and Jeremiah are cool. They're gonna apparently stream together, do some kind of podcast together. But Taylor, he's the one that still looked like the follower because at the end of the day, he's the one in all his other interviews that were saying, that Jeremiah was saying that nobody could talk to Andreina. He has been one of the harder writers for the propaganda that Jeremiah was love bombing. And I love how Jeremiah was saying, okay, you're saying I was doing too much with love bombing, but in the video you consistently said I was also doing too little and not doing enough dates like Ace and things like that. So Jeremiah got to, get that stuff off his chest and basically proved that Huda was also lying and speaking out both sides of her mouth when she made it appear to others that he was love bombing. For example, when Huda told the girls that Jeremiah said that he would live with her, and Jeremiah was like, I clearly did not say that. I said there are steps, to us, having long distance first, then maybe moving in together if we get through that, So again, Jeremiah did very well, and the snake that he thought Nick was actually Taylor because, again, him and Ace are cool. I think in other interviews, Jeremiah was saying that Nick surprised him. And then Nick in his interviews was saying he was going to crash out if a certain clip wasn't played. And boom, they pulled up the footages. And sure as the sun shines, Nick got vindicated. And the snake turned out to be Taylor. Because Nick said if there's a chance that Andreina and Jeremiah have something, then Jeremiah should not go home. But Ace, who was always against Jeremiah, voted for Jeremiah. And Taylor, again, voted for Jeremiah and has always been campaigning saying that Jeremiah was doing the same patterns and Jeremiah wasn't letting nobody talk to Andreina and la 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 la. And for me, I just feel like Taylor came across as very immature this interview and just throughout the season. Literally, Ariana had to press him to make him apologize to Olandria. And it's always somebody more mature making Taylor do things, like how Ace was making Taylor, show affection to Olandria. And even when he kissed Olandria, he would look at Ace for approval. And here, even when Ariana was like, don't you think you owe Olandria an apology? The apology was so childish, talking about, you my dog. I was sick of Taylor. And I'm surprised that nobody got on him about how he's very rough with Clark on the lives. I don't like how he pushes Clark in the head and mushes her on these lives. Apparently he is spending a lot of money on her. And apparently on the live he threatened to take back the bags and the stuff that he's buying for her. To me, Taylor has a lot of maturing to do. Hopefully he does mature. And hopefully Clark doesn't have to keep getting hurt while he does it. But at the end of the day, Ace claims that Taylor and Clark and him and Chelly are the only real couples at the villa. But at the end of the day, for Jeremiah's situation, Ace and Jeremiah are cool because Jeremiah has always said that Ace was always real with him. And now Jeremiah and Nick are cool because it has been revealed that Nick had his back. And I saw on Marcel's page, it's like the fan page for Nick and Olandria's baby. Nick and Marcel, his baby, said that Jeremiah has been promoted to a cool uncle now. So they're back cool. So the snake that Jeremiah thought was Nick was actually just still Taylor all along. Now the number 2 Rumble actually happened in 2 parts. Huda versus Chelly. Now the 2 main clashes that Huda and Chelly had was involving bringing Chris back home from Casagate and then also the heart rate challenge gate. And I call it a draw because I think Huda kind of won the Chris Gate argument, at least at the reunion, even though I'm on Chelly's side because I think, again, Huda has deeper issues of jealousy with Chelly. But then Chelly definitely was vindicated when they played the heart rate challenge video. Basically, for Chris Gate, they played a clip of basically Huda saying what she said about how she was bringing back Chris for the both of them. But I'll admit, in the video, Chelly's body language looked like she was uncomfortable with it. But where Chelly went wrong is that she just didn't tell Huda upright, no, I'm not comfortable with this, because the fact that she said, okay, I guess, gave Huda the green light and made it so that Huda could act confused. But at the end of the day, Huda knew she was going to do it anyway. She told Chelly she was going to do it anyway. So Chelly had no business, co-sign or even giving her half-hearted co-sign, because she had it out when Huda said she was going to do it anyway. She should have said, okay, if you're going to do it anyway, then you don't need to speak to me, but I'm not comfortable with it. Or even if she didn't say, okay, then Huda wouldn't have had an excuse to, play victim like she did. But that's where Chelly went wrong, not saying how she really felt. And then with the heart rate challenge, oh Lord, they played the whole clip, and it was not for the children of God to really watch. But at the end of the day, Huda and Ace definitely went too far. In the Speedy interview, Ace did say that Chelly punished him for like a week. That's why he didn't smile for like 4 episodes. So everybody's saying that Chelly should have been mad at Ace. Needs to know, if you watch the Speedy interview, Ace said that yes, Chelly did punish him. And she did take long to close off with him. Remember, they didn't close off till the hideaway, so it was shown in the show that Chelly was feeding him with a long spoon for how he was, like he said, bouncing the basketballs. But Huda herself, she was not forthcoming, because in the Call Her Daddy podcast, she claimed that she only did, I guess, the lick move. But you saw in the heart rate challenge that she and Ace were like, making out long after Chris and Chelly were done. And Ace was, I don't know what he was looking for when, she was backed up on his chest, but he was spreading everything, looking very deep and very long and very wide. It was very inappropriate. And she was letting him, she didn't get up, he didn't push her off. So I think they were both wrong. And Chelly did punish Ace. And she told her that I'm not your friend anymore after that. And I was on her side, because she even said it. She's like, do I have to tell my friend not to lick my boyfriend's stuff? It's like pretty self-explanatory that she crossed the line, especially given how she was acting towards Jeremiah and how she was calling even the Bombshells B words for even breathing near Jeremiah. And that's why Andy asked her, how would you have felt if somebody did to Jeremiah what you did to Ace? And Hood never answered the question. Hood Lamort was like, oh, well, I smiled when people was, kissing Chris. But everybody knows she didn't like Chris like that. She wouldn't even kiss Chris in public. So, again, the true answer to the question, or the true test of if she had double standards or not, would have been if she would have been cool about Jeremiah. And everybody knows she would have crashed out, because she was doing bone breaking to cuss out Iris when Iris first came, during the bondage challenge. And she was cussing out Amaya, so everybody knows she would have been cool with none of that. And last but not least, the number one most impactful Rumble at the reunion was Huda versus NicOlandria. And there's been fallout even after the reunion. Okay, let's do the Nick stuff first, because that's the quickest thing. So after all this time of giving Huda grace, Nick finally unfollowed Huda after the reunion today. For the people who are wondering, well, why did it take so long? I think Nick was waiting to see what Huda's first post after the reunion would be, when Olandria made it clear her feelings. And Huda posted some foolishness again about why she couldn't talk about that too hot to handle boy, Louis. So I think that's the straw that broke Nick's back. When she posted about that foolish publicity relationship and still didn't make a statement about racism, I think that's what made Nick unfollow her for sure. And for other people who said that Nick wasn't standing up for Olandria, Jeremiah came out and confirmed that Nick did stand up for Olandria at the reunion, but they cut it out. And even in the reunion, you could see that Nick's eyes were really red and he was tearing up when Olandria was crying and talking about her face being pasted on George Floyd's body and all that horrible, nasty vitriol that she faced. And I definitely think that Nick has good intentions when it comes to Olandria, even if they don't get married and live happily ever after. Right now, he is making her dreams come true in real time. She said that he basically hooked up these modeling gigs for her when she told him that she wanted to be a model. She told him that, she wanted to travel the world, and he hooked her up with a trip to Greece. Their moms talk and communicate and are good friends. I think if anything else, they're a great support network for each other. And I don't think you could fake, the way they look at each other and the way they kiss and all that stuff. I'm definitely NicOlandria Nation. But let's say the romance isn't there, the friendship and the love is still there. Like, I don't know, again, what Ace was on, because they're getting to the bag together and they're doing it so beautifully and supporting each other so beautifully. So why are you trying to mess up their bag? It's giving such jealousy, Ace, and I'm so disappointed in you. But at the end of the day, let's get to the Olandria side, because with Huda, Ariana asked Huda directly, like, you and Olandria had a great friendship. Why are you saying that, you didn't feel like you could go to Olandria? Why not turn to her? Y'all had a great friendship. And Huda saying, oh yeah, I love that B word, which I don't like. I don't like how she calls the black man brother, and I don't like how she acts like she's so down and she calls Olandria and people the B word, and this time claims that she's being bullied. It's like, stop using the foul language, because when she was looking at her, package, she was laughing at all the evil things she was doing to people, and Andy called her out. It was like, I would ask you how you feel, but you're laughing. You think all this is funny? And then Huda tried to say, oh no, I'm changed. And Andy was like, no, I don't think you could change in a month, but okay, let's say you change. What would you do differently now that you're supposedly a changed person? And Huda literally said, oh, the cursing and the cussing people out. And again, she gonna go and call Olandria B. I don't like that. And I know she was saying, oh, this is playful, but it's not a game. Olandria's family was getting death threats. Her face was being plastered on George Floyd's body. And Olandria told Huda at the reunion that she and Chelly explained to her that actually what's going on with them is a lot of racism from her fans. Could she please make a post about it? And apparently Huda promised to make a post, but she did not follow through on her own words. So there, on those grounds alone of her not being a person of integrity, her not following through on her own promise to make a post like Chelly did, was everything that Olandria needed to know to end the friendship. And I'm glad that she did, because at the end of the day, I don't think Huda means Chelly well at all. And I think she's glad, especially that Chelly was getting the hate and like all that stuff with the BuzzFeed knuckle sandwich to Chelly, by saying that Chelly was her bully directly after reunion and indirectly in all these podcast interviews. But people lump Chelly and Olandria together. And Huda could have said something to her fans like she promised Olandria that she would, but she didn't, because I think she secretly likes Chelly, especially getting punished, and she doesn't care about Olandria that much. She cares most about herself. She's self-centered, and I really feel like sometimes she doesn't know what's going on, because literally the way she was laughing and looking like Alice in Wonderland a lot of times during the show, and even during the reunion, makes me feel like she does need some kind of more intentional unpacking of, her mental state and all of that. But at the end of the day, just the lies too, talking about how she had a contract with Netflix and saying that she stood on business when literally she hid the fact that she wrote that bad stuff about Gracyn, and it claiming that Chelly bullied her when literally Chelly and Olandria were supporting her the whole time. And even the clips that she saw was what she claimed convinced her that she had been bullied retroactively, which is not how bullying works. Like, I thought Huda just looked very, very in need of prayer at the reunion. So please pray for her. But I think Olandria was smart to just say, hey, I'm not into this trail of broken promises and backstabbing. And Nick finally unfollowing Huda, I think, will be the final end to the drama and all the negative things that Huda have done to these people. So hopefully NicOlandria continues to do their brandies and their positivity. I saw Olandria basically preaching, talking about if you have, any problems, give it to God. And I do believe that Olandria is a praying woman, because all these people doing her dirty are not seeing the blessings that she is seeing, again, with her Knicks contract. And even, again, this beautiful relationship, whether it's a friendship or like a romance, whatever. Nick really has her back, and I'm happy for her. Say how you felt about the reunion in the comments, and follow No Chaser TV also to see like the longer reunion recap. But yeah, these were my top 10 reunion rumble moments and my thoughts on the Ace and Speedy interview. Remember, these people are just people, and what we see on TV is not, their whole self, so don't go attacking them on their pages. But if you do have any thoughts about the message or the lessons that they taught us for the TV, put it in the comments, because I like, to hear what you guys think too. And remember, you're the master of your fate and the captain of your soul. Bye.